A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. And welcome, I was having a look through my diary today. We're almost halfway through September. It's got probably hours away until I walk into my local supermarket and hear Boney M and see the tinsel up and the Christmas rush is upon us. It's a downhill slalom to the end of the year, which means we have a very, very busy last quarter for Dan Really Likes Wine. A really enjoyable one, some really fun stuff coming up on the horizon, including shows from the Alfred Dunhill in Scotland. We'll have some stuff from Switzerland, some stuff from Hong Kong, some stuff from different parts of South Africa, including a very cool champagne experience that's coming up next week down at the Cape Grace in Cape Town, and just lots of really fun stuff to do. And a lot of stuff does have an international bent. And I look back, I spent most of August traveling through America, finding only occasional glimpses of South African wine, drinking a great deal of American wine and wine from other parts of the world, a fair amount from Argentina and Chile, and the odd bottle from Europe. And it was great for two reasons. One of those reasons was that I found some really good wine. In particular, some of the wine out of Washington State, out of Oregon, was really exceptional. So beyond just the usual big Napas, the big Chardonnays, and the even bigger Cabs, a lot of wine with more delicacy, more elegance, more subtlety from places which we don't always associate with the wine world in America, being so far away from there. So that was really cool. But it also offered a great deal of perspective in that a lot of the wine was very good. Some of it was not too bad. But when you took the wine and you set it aside a similar quality wine, and then you looked at prices with South Africa, not that we need it, but it was just another reminder of how the world's greatest wine, when you bring value into the equation, is from South Africa. And quite often just the world's greatest wine, full stop, is from South Africa. And you do need a little of that perspective sometimes, I think, just a reminder of how good we actually have it here in South Africa. And week in, week out, we celebrate with these extraordinary winemakers, the wonderful wine they give us to revel in. And sometimes you look and you think, oh, yeah, that's 250 Rand for Chardonnay, that's 300 Rand for Syrah, that's quite a lot of money as we think back to not that long ago when maybe wines were a little cheaper. But all you need to do is set it up against the price of wine from abroad, and it comes back in very, very stark perspective just how well we do here in South Africa. And that leads rather nicely into today's show, because I have four winemakers who've all got some quite exciting news to celebrate on the show, but also in slightly different ways give us, again, very strong reminders of just how good the wine here in South Africa is. On one occasion, we've got a brand new name and brand new wine. On the other, we've got a wine that's been going for 100 years. And yet both of those wines, despite being on very different ends of the chronological scale of production, offer so much to us, an African wine offering, and it is a delight to be able to celebrate them today. So on the show this evening, we'll be looking at the 100th vintage of Alto. We'll be looking at a Himalayan Ardor house that's decided bubbles is the way to go. We'll look at the winemaker who put Rupert Rothschild on the map, but now has a brand new venture. And we'll also be looking at a big transfer in the wine world as a winemaker moves from one space to another. We'll find out why, and why that challenge and excitement of new journeys, new opportunities is such a fundamental part of being a winemaker. So all that to come on Dan Really Likes Wine this evening, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. Before we meet our quartet of winemaking stars, let's have a quick look at some of the latest wine news. This is coming up with Derek and the team at Great Domaine. Solaya, one of the great names of Italian wines. Marchesi Antinori, the chance to drink some super Tuscans with Francesca Branconi and Mauro Pavesi. There are two evenings. One is in Johannesburg, the other is in Cape Town. And this is just proper pedigree wine. This is Italian wine in a linen suit with designer sunglasses and a pair of Todds slipping on to a motorboat in polished ebony as it slips onto the waters of Lake Como. This is the kind of wine that made the Super Tuscans what they are. Remember when they first appeared on the scene and they had Cabernet Sauvignon in them, and the establishment in Italy all turned up its nose and said, we can't possibly do this, as wines from Bulgaria and the regions around it gave this brand new interpretation of Italian wine to the world. And then they started winning all sorts of awards, and the Italian establishment had to backtrack somewhat. And now the Super Tuscans lead so much of Italy's wine charge around the world. This is your chance to be part of it. Head over to the Great Domains website and you'll find the details. Get there quickly, though. I expect these will sell out rather quickly. Saddleback WineX is coming up. It is back at the Sandton Convention Centre, 31 October and 1 November, as Michael Frigion brings out his collection of designer bow ties and an awful lot of very, very good wine. We're going to be putting together a little get the best out of WineX video with Michael and his team over the next week or two, simply because if you haven't been before, it can be quite daunting. It can be quite daunting even if you have been before. There is so much wine. How possibly do you get through all of it, get through some of it, decide what to try and get through? It can be tricky, but if you get it right, you do a little planning, you can not only taste some magnificent wine, but also walk away with some really good wine at really good prices, with Norman Goodfellows handling that aspect of it. In the diary, tickets are on sale at Saddleback WineX 2024, Sandton Convention Centre. Dan really likes wine. We'll be there. Hopefully, so will you. This is George Young, named South Africa's best young sommelier at Viljoen, if memory serves. They had the competition in Stellenbosch last weekend. I know Mike Radcliffe was part of this. I've seen a couple of comments from people involved in the judging or people who are watching it. They all said exactly the same thing. The quality of our young sommelier is absolutely outstanding. And it's just a broader tip of the hat to our wine industry, where so many elements are outstanding. Winemakers get loads of the limelight. They certainly deserve it, but we have amazing viticulturalists. We have incredible commercial people. We have great sales teams, terrific distributors, and then the sommeliers, the people who on the on-trade consumption, the restaurants and similar guys who really do share the wonders of South African wine so well with our markets, and George Young is one of the finest. Appropriate name for this award, one to scribble down and look out for, because we're going to be hearing plenty more of it. Congratulations, George Young, South Africa's best young sommelier. All right, well, there's your news for today. Let's head over to our guests and say a very, very warm welcome to Bertho, who joins us not for the first time from Alto. A warm welcome to Yvonne Lester, to Megan Mullis, and to DeWet Viljoen. Guys, welcome to all of you. Lovely to have you along. I'm feeling slightly intimidated by the star power before me on this evening's show. It's lovely to have you here, and we have much to celebrate, much to raise a glass to, much to smile about. But very quickly, Bertho, and without trying to dampen the tone, more raise a glass in great memory, because although it's been a really special last stretch for Alto, as you bring out quite remarkably your 100th vintage, while you've been pouring it, while you've been celebrating it, I know you've been remembering somebody very close to the Alto team who we sadly said goodbye to, but somebody who leaves a wonderful legacy for Alto and the Alto family.
Yes, Dan, thank you very much. Yeah, it was obviously not something that you foresee any day, and unfortunately our viticulturist Donnie passed away last Wednesday. Well, I think he was at his happy place because he was in the vineyards, busy with what he loves to do and what he's done for his whole life. He's been involved with Alto for the last just over 20 years, 21 years, and in the group was more than 25 years. So obviously he will leave an enormous legacy, and I've got massive boots to fill. So yeah, condolences to his family and his children, and yeah, to everyone close to him.
Well, he will be remembered with great fondness, as too will Dani Malan from Alles Verloren, who also very sadly left us. So some moments to sit back and reflect in the wine industry. But also, Bertho, I'm sure some moments for you and your team to sit back and think about a century. And I've been drinking Alto Rouge pretty much since I got to South Africa to go to university. And it's always been one of those South African brands that's just part of the wine furniture. And yet it's still, I had to just double check and make sure this wasn't Emil or your PR team getting a bit over enthusiastic. How can you possibly have been going for 100 years? But that is correct. It is 100 vintages of Alto Rouge.
Yes, Dan. Yeah, no, we're in a very fortunate position. The first Alto Rouge was produced in 1922, obviously, but so we've only released the 22 vintage now. So that's the 100th release. So yeah, we were very started in humble beginnings, but the Malans who made the right choices back in the days laid the foundation for this great brand to grow. And initially, they had the university actually back in those days already involved in viticultural practices here. And the famous Dr. Pierold, Professor Pierold, actually, he taught the first Malan winemaker at the university, and it was his teacher. And he was also actively involved with his father, Umhini Malan, to plant the vines here. And they focused on Cinsault mainly, and with Cab and Shiraz. So they wanted to make an accessible wine. For the first 10 years, it was only exported. So it was exported to the UK in barrel, and it was exported as a Burgundian wine. So that's quite interesting, having the Cinsault background with Cab and Shiraz. And it was imported by a company in the UK called Bourgogne. And they imported the wine until the 1960s. So they started when they sent the first samples across to the UK. They took the first lot, everything, and then everything built from there. And then only in 1933, the Alto Rouge was actually released in South Africa on the market. So we've had 100 consecutive commercial production of wine in Alto, and yeah, very blessed and fortunate for that.
You've managed to do a couple of things with this brand over and above just keeping it going for 100 years. You've managed to keep it as a consistently outstanding wine, but also one that is consistently accessible. And if you set aside the initial stretch when you could only get it if you're in the UK or knew somebody there or had somebody who was sailing back to South Africa to bring some with them, it's a wine that is at a price point I often, and I say this at the risk of incurring the wrath of Alto Rouge fans across the country, I've often felt is somewhat underpriced given the quality of the wine. But I feel that that's part of the charm, part of the history, part of the brand that is Alto Rouge, that you make this terrific South African, terrific Stellenbosch red, but it's not one that you're going to have to sell the family house to be able to buy a case of.
Yeah, I think, it's always a difficult question in balancing volume and I think value for money. I don't think value for money is the right word. I would like to refer to as the commercial side of the business. But I think the fortunate thing for South African wine lovers is that people's got so many stories. There are people that come here and they tell you, 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, I had a date with my first girlfriend and I ordered Alto Rouge, and that was the wine of the evening. Or wedding stories, anniversaries, and you can go on. We must actually have a competition, like tell your story to Alto. What is your involvement or your story? And it's just wonderful to be part of the South African history of winemaking and part of everyday life in most people's homes and people that has enjoyed red wine since varsity days. So yeah, very fortunate and proud of that.
Well, I can see how much this means to you, Bertho, because you do appear to be blushing at all of the attention. We'll give you a moment and come back, because I got a few more things I want to find out about being the custodian of this wine. You've got 100 years of vintages. This here, the Yvonne Chardonnay, this is your one vintage. I'm just getting the light there. This is number one from Yvonne. Now, I know lots about this wine, Yvonne, because a gentleman by the name of Mark Lester, who's busy watching on Instagram at the moment, has probably sent me about 70 emails, WhatsApps, Instagram messages. At one point, he sent me a fax just to be absolutely sure that I would feature a wine he is very proud of. As lovely as that is, I don't think you really needed to, because when you are Yvonne Lester, you certainly have the pedigree to have the world wanting to see what's next. Tell us about the journey, the build-up to deciding this is what I want to do. It's going to be on my own terms, and this is the wine that I want to kick off with.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much. Lovely to be on the show. Lovely to see you again. Yes, so this is my maiden release. So it's 2023. And I think I arrived at a point in my career when I thought, you know what, if I want to do something on my own, it should be now. I'm not going to wait until I'm 60 years old. I think now is a really great time in life to do so. And then I decided, well, I always used to make the Baroness Nadine, as you know, and Chardonnay is my passion. So, and I also wanted to do something which is part of a family story, which is very close to my heart. So the Chardonnay that I made is coming from Robertson, from my grandfather's farm, Montplois, which my cousin Adams Brewer is farming. So I trust him fully in the vineyards. He's an amazing farmer. And I wanted to do something very site specific. So it's a single vineyard Chardonnay. So the name Yvonne is quite easy to understand, Yvonne. And then I've got a little shield that I created, which is my background, my history. So on the left and right side, you can see two little horses. That's from my German grandfather, which was in the wine industry. He was very good friends with Dr. Rupert, and they started Bergkelder in the late 40s. So that's also a lot of history, although this is my first vintage. And then in the middle, you'll see a header. That's from my Adams Brewer Afrikaans grandfather. So these two are quite big figures in the South African wine industry. They were very, very good friends because Bergkelder obviously needed grapes. So that's how they met through the wine industry. And so Bergkelder bought grapes from Montplois. It's now more than 70 years that they are buying grapes. I think it's 77 or 78 years now. And they became family friends. That's how my mom and dad met each other. And that's why I grew up in the wine industry. So I thought, to have a family story, it's very important. And the Chardonnay is coming from beautiful, beautiful limestone soils from the Robertson Valley. And because it's a single vineyard, at the back of the bottle, you see there's the name Kweekamp. That is the name of the block. And I did 3 separate pickings. And if you want, I can explain you the wine, or do you want to ask furthermore background, Dan?
Let's get a touch more background, because I'm fascinated about the step that you have to take. Most winemakers at some point will have that itch to scratch. I want to make my own wine, make a wine on my own terms. And this is the point to which you've made incredible wine for some time now. You're very well established as a terrific winemaker. People know who you are and what you can do. That notwithstanding, how nerve-wracking was this experience, deciding, right, I'm going to do this on my own terms, produce this, and then show it to the world? Was it a nice, easy, confident job, or was it a slightly nervous experience?
No, Dan, for sure. It was a slight nervous experience, for sure. But, as any wine, you need the best grapes. So I knew my cousin Adam Trevaris got beautiful Chardonnay. So first up, good grapes. And then obviously winemaking, but that for me is my passion and quite easy to do. I love it. And then obviously distribution and selling. And as you know, my husband is doing that. So if you've got all the building blocks, and I've got the network, I've been making wine for, I shouldn't say how old I am now, but more than 20 years. So the most important building blocks, that was completely in place. And I thought, you got to jump, take the leap of faith. And I'm super happy so far. Really well received.
And understandably so. It is a terrific wine. We'll talk through the details of it in a moment. You have a brand new wine, Megan. You've got a brand new journey, because you guys have made quite a big decision out on the Hemelanada, a stretch that immediately conjures up thoughts of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but usually in the still form. You guys have decided for something a little different. Tell me about this change of heart and this new vision that you're embarking upon.
Yes, thanks, Dan. A lot of people who know Domaine de Dieux as a brand already know us for our Cup Classiques, particularly the Claudia, but our whole range that we've got in our Cup Classiques, currently Rosa Sharon as well, and the Anna Louise Cuvée. And we sort of discovered from quite some time ago that the quality of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir coming out of the Himalaya was exceptional, which I think most people do know, but exceptional for Cup Classique as well. And it's been a big passion for us, a big drive for our family to always have this focus on Cup Classique. And so, it was, I think, if we're honest about it, a natural evolution or inevitable, if you will, that at some point we would realize that this required almost all of our focus. So we have taken the decision to specialize as a purely Cup Classique house. So going forward from next year, our production will be only in Cup Classique and no longer in still wine, which is really exciting for us. I've got a big passion around the education, educating both a local and international market on a South African Cup Classique. And it really does, the specialization and this focus really does give an opportunity to expand on that and do more of that. It also means we will be growing our range of Cup Classiques that we currently offer. So we have 3 at the moment. We're just adding another 3, which are coming out in the month of September, towards the end of September, early October. So yeah, it really for us is just following a passion, following a dedication that we've already had for many years, and just putting all of our eggs in one basket and specializing in that. And I think we will see the rewards of that in years to come.
I think you've got enough of a fan base to suggest you'll have plenty of people very excited about the way forward. Also, there are people who might be a little surprised that there's not more of this. There's not more bubbles in the Himalaya. There is such great Chardonnay, such superb Pinot Noir, the 2 grapes we know that drive so much of Champagne, drive so much of Cup Classique. Why do you think there isn't more Cup Classique coming out of the Himalaya?
I think that over time, and I mean, we sort of were the first producer in the region to be doing Cup Classique. So I think for a lot of people, it was not a first thought of, we have exceptional Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, let's make a beautiful Cup Classique from it. It was more sort of a traditional, perhaps more Burgundian style. But I think since our first release in 2006 of our Claudia, I definitely think the recognition that it's received, and the fan base that it has built up, a lot of producers started to realize, that there is potential to make some beautiful Cup Classiques. It's still on a much smaller scale. I mean, there are a few producers in the Himalayan Order that are making exclusively from the Cellar Door, a couple that I've got in retail outlets, some Cup Classique. And I don't see why that won't perhaps grow into the future. I mean, we very much pride ourselves on being the home of Himalayan Order Cup Classique, and our new renovations to our tasting rooms when it reopen is meant to be this completely immersive experience in both education and enjoying Cup Classique. And we're really hoping that is a massive draw card for the Himalaya, bringing people here, bringing Cup Classique lovers here. And I hope that there will be follow on from that, having so many more lovers of Cup Classique in the region, that maybe other producers that already are making beautiful still wine, Pinot Noir, and Chardonnay might decide to dabble in a bit of Cup Classique. And, you can never have too much bubbly. There can never be too much bubbles. So, we may see that grow, and I hope so. I really do believe our proximity to the sea, the beautiful, cool maritime influence, the high natural acidities we're getting, they just lend themselves to the most spectacular fruit for Cup Classique, and creating those high natural acids. So I think it would be exciting to see a little bit more coming out of our region.
I think you might be something of a trailblazer, Megan, and we'll see more coming out of the area. If you want a great synopsis of where our Cup Classique scene is in South Africa at the moment, then catch up with the show from a few weeks ago around Cup Classique Day. We had people like Anne Ferreira and Janie Eads telling us some terrific stories about where we sit at the moment. Back to bubbles in a second. Let's jump over to the last of our guests, and one who caught a lot of people, I think, by surprise, DeWet, because you'd had a fairly long tenure with Neethlingshof, and you've now moved off to what a number of your new neighbours happily term the Bot Riviera, as you find your home in Wikdekrans. It is a part of being a winemaker that you do tend to move around through your career. Tell me about your decision, though, to move on, to start a new journey, and to embrace the challenge at Wikdekrans.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, it's almost been a year since my move, and it's been a lot of fun. So I've obviously had a good run with Neethlingshof for almost more than 20 years. So I just managed to make that 20-year club, but then it was time to move on. And I'll always be grateful for my time that side of the mountain. But now I am fully invested in the Riviera, as you say, and what a beautiful part of the world it is. It's certainly this time of year is extra beautiful with the canola, the fields, the rolling fields, and the beauty that the area can offer. And apart from that, the terroir is just amazing for growing grapes. It's beautiful soils, certainly cooler climate, and for a guy that's been used to struggle with high pHs, suddenly you're working in an area where the pH and the acidity is fantastic. So that's a fresh start. And I must put it out there that I'm very grateful for the opportunity that the Harlow family, especially Gary, offered me when he offered me this position, and I'm thankful for that. And I decided it was time for a change, and yeah, it's just been fun up until now. And hopefully, in a year or two's time, when you taste the wines, then I would have been able to put my stamp on the wines, and the consumers would enjoy it too. So that's where I'm at now, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity that I've been given.
I see Eugene Jabert is watching on Facebook and raising a glass to DeWet. So your fan club is out and about. Also see Helena Mellis from Big Five Duty Free is watching on Instagram, amongst many others. Lovely to have you on, Helena. You've alluded to an answer to my next question, DeWet, and that is the challenge of moving over. You've spent a long time in one particular place. For people who are not too familiar with winemaking, it would seem fairly simple. Well, yeah, you're making wine. How hard can it be moving from one place to another? The reality is that there are some quite marked differences, others a lot more subtle. What has the year been like in terms of, beyond just the pH differences, getting a feel for brand new vineyards, brand new terroir, brand new space from which to create wine?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's having to be able to think out of the box and accepting the challenge. So I'm stepping very carefully now, because I think I'm not a recipe winemaker. I like to express my own stamp and my own personality into the wines, and it was time to move on. So the biggest change, obviously, is the terroir. It's different. It's different soils. So it's not simply starting with guns blazing and changing a lot of things. Wikdekrans certainly has a fantastic track record in terms of making quality wines, achieving accolades. And a lot of well-known winemakers were there before me. So that in itself is a challenge, but I do like the possibility to work with familiar cultivars like Pinotage and Chenin and Shiraz and Cabernet Franc, but then also throw into the mix Grenache Blanc and Tempranillo. It's certainly fantastic to be able to at this time of my career to be tested in a certain sense, to work with new cultivars, but also to try and make the best possible wine that I can, and then throw into the mix the fact that the yields are very low, and the Riviera can be very windy at times. So that in itself is a challenge too, and it means that the growth cycle of our vineyards is slightly shorter. But it all adds to the elegance, the specific characteristics of the wine. So it is interesting. it's constantly thinking and constantly changing and evolving. And that in itself, it's a wonderful experience.
So plenty of new wines across the board to discuss. Let's have a look at some of them in a little more detail. Kicking over to you, Yvonne, to start with. Chardonnay and Robertson, very natural companions, and led by people like the DeWet Viljoen team. We've really seen in recent times a Chardonnay that's from an area that's often seen as being a little blue-collarish, really top-class, world-class Chardonnay, and in the hands of somebody like yourself with all that Baroness Nadine experience, the ability to turn it into something special. What is it about Robertson, about your particular single vineyard, that is giving you the grapes that allow you to create what I now know firsthand is a most delightful Chardonnay?
Dan, it's actually a very easy answer to that question, and it always comes back to the same thing, and you cannot emphasize it enough. It's the soil. So actually I have some, let me see, I'll show you. This is like proper limestone soils, and that is the beauty of it. So I think in that specific valley, I mean, those soils are ancient, and it's beautiful limestone soils, and that creates the wine. So to work with DeWet was just talking about the low pH and the high acidity. That's exactly what I have in Robertson. And I love also to do early pickings. So the limestone creates the low pH and the high acidity, the freshness. So my focus on this wine is absolutely the purity of the soil. And you can immediately taste. Are you ready for tasting, Dan? Can I continue or not yet?
Please do. Fire away.
Yes. Do you have a glass in front of you?
I do indeed.
Did you pour yourself some wine?
I've got about 6 glasses of wine. I'm not going to be much use on the kids' homework tonight unless questions about world-class Chardonnay come up.
Okay, perfect. All right, so I did the 2023 harvest, the maiden vintage. So I did 3 separate pickings because it's a single vineyard, of course. So I picked end of Jan and then beginning of Feb, 2 more pickings because I really wanted to show the terroir, and I focused on the purity of the fruit. So I did those 3 pickings, and then I put them in the first 2 batches in old barrels, 300-liter barrels, but old, like 4th and 5th full. And then I also used a small ceramic egg tank for the last batch to have a nice balance. And then these 3 batches, I did separate fermentations. And then I do not do malolactic fermentation on either batch. I prefer actually to work with the lees and work with the batonnage on the wine. So to create a very nice texture and nice layers coming through. So the focus on this wine is all the flint and mineral salinity. So on the nose, I'm sure you've poured yourself some wine now, Dan. So from the Robertson fruit, you get absolutely beautiful citrus, lemon, lime. Then you get the orange blossom, some kiwi fruits, little white pear, and then that's all on the aroma. And when you taste, you'll find the same. But for me, the beauty of the Chardonnay is the length, the delicate flavors, the beautiful texture, the depth. And it's a wine that you can drink now, but you can mature very, very long. And that was my goal, to create a wine that you can drink now, but a South African Chardonnay that you can keep for 10 years plus. So even when I open the bottle and I pour the wine, actually normally I decant the Chardonnay because it's very, very young. But you'll find so many different layers coming out. And you can have it with food, you can have it without food, pairs beautifully with seafood, something fresh, oysters, sushi, any kind of seafood dish. But the beauty of this is if you leave it in the glass and it opens up slowly, finally you'll get to the secondary flavors, which will be more roasted almonds and soft nougat flavors. But the focus will still be on the length and the salinity, the freshness of the flavors. And that was the goal.
I want to ask you one final question about the Chardonnay. I could talk about this for ages. But what you have here is exactly the kind of Chardonnay that's had people like Jancis Robinson talking so excitedly about South African Chardonnay over the last couple of years, that there is the purity of fruit, there is the elegance, there is a wine that invites you in very gently rather than hammering you over the back of the head with a very large branch, which was the story of Chardonnay not that long ago. You've been making Chardonnay for a long time. This Chardonnay, and I've had a lot of your Chardonnay in previous iterations. This is, for me, as lovely as anything you have ever made, but in a very much a style that we're seeing a lot more of now. What is your sense on the evolution of Chardonnay in South Africa, which I think leads to where this wine is today, and the understanding of the South African wine drinking public of where Chardonnay has got to?
Thanks, Dan. It's exactly that. People are so much more focused on Chardonnay these days. Chardonnay category is doing much, much better. I work a lot in the trade now, so I work a lot with the consumers and different somms, and they're also positive, very positive. But Chardonnay, the category is growing, goes fantastically well with food wine pairings on the menu. So it's very, very versatile. And yes, 100% right. People enjoy more the purity of fruit. And I mean, the Chardonnay, this alcohol is 13%. It's not heavy. It's actually exactly the opposite. It's vibrant and fresh. And people are completely open to that. So I think this point in time in South African wine industry, actually in the world as well, it's completely where the people are leaning towards. So I'm very happy to experience that as well. And I get beautiful feedback. And I mean, I've only released the wine in July. I've got a lot of beautiful listings at premium restaurants, and all the consumers, all the clients are reordering now and giving me thumbs up. They're loving it. It goes beautiful in the restaurants with food as well. So yeah, no, 100% in that direction of style.
It's not a new challenge, but it's one that's amplified ever so slightly with this wine. It drinks so nicely now. How on earth can you hang on to it to see what it does in years to come? I shall do my best. DeWet, jumping back to you with wine. I remember sitting with you not that long ago. We sat at lunch and we had a lengthy conversation around Pinotage. And just as Yvonne and I have now been speaking about Chardonnay, and I see, sorry to interrupt, Paul Speece is watching on Facebook. Great to see Yvonne, incredible winemaker. She certainly is. But just as there's been this evolution in Chardonnay, so Pinotage has been through quite an interesting journey, and I know it's a grape that means a lot to you, and it's a grape that I think you find a very happy home in at Wikdekrans. We had some of the barrel from Barrel Select Pinotage over the weekend. I think here I've got some of the Cape Blend, which is 42% Pinotage. It's a grape that you've not only worked a lot with, but I think you've often found yourself almost having to defend, because Pinotage often finds itself in that space. Chardonnay's journey, Yvonne has captured beautifully. Where is the Pinotage journey gone, and how does your new chapter fit into that journey?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I've put a new background on the year behind me, so just to give you an idea of what the Openberg and the Botrivier is looking like at the moment. So get back to Pinotage. Pinotage has always been part of my journey as a winemaker. I've been very fortunate to be mentored by a couple of greats in terms of Pinotage winemakers, and I think Wikdekrans, in terms of Pinotage and Cape Blends, have really done remarkably well in the past. And that to me was sort of the final seal of approval when I decided to move, is the fact that they do grow Pinotage and that I would like to work with Pinotage in this area. So the vines, first of all, we have a good mix of older bush vines as well as trellised vineyards, and obviously I think it must also be said that a great Pinotage winemaker and advocate in the name of Francois Dieux has always been involved with Wikdekrans in the past. When William Wilkinson was the winemaker, then he helped a lot. So this to me is fantastic, and now I have the opportunity to work with Pinotage again. That was always my biggest fear, was if I should move, that I could still make Pinotage, and because I'm also involved with the Pinotage Association, and now I've found a new home for Pinotage, and hopefully I can showcase what Wikdekrans can do. So you alluded to it. We have two range of wines, and by the way, our wines are all available at your sponsor at Norman Goodfellows. We do an estate range, which is our entry level, and then we do a barrel select range, which is our reserve range of wines. And we have, under both ranges, we have a Pinotage, a straight Pinotage, as well as a Cape blend, which consists majority of Pinotage with other varieties. And then with the barrel select range, it's a selection of the best vineyards as well as a selection of the best barrels within a batch, and that is then bottled and sold as such. In general, the estate range would be about 10 to 12 months barrel aging, mainly older barrels, where the barrel select range is much longer, 18 to 24 months, with a good portion of new oak in that blend. The biggest difference between this Pinotage and the Pinotage from a slightly warmer area, it's funny that I should say this, but in this instance, Stellenbosch is the warmer area. So I'm sitting on the other side of the equilibrium at the moment. So I think with a slightly cooler area, lighter soils, you get much more elegance in your wine. And then obviously with a lower pH, which is always going to be beneficial to Pinotage, you'll get much more longevity and drinkability as the wine matures and ages. So that is fantastic. And that's hopefully what I can work with going forward.
Just quickly, without stretching the Pinotage conversation too long, I suspect it's one we need to have again with a few other members of the Pinotage inner circle. But where we see Pinotage now as trying to work out exactly what the identity is or should be. We're seeing lighter styles. We're still seeing some of the bigger ones. Where is the future for Pinotage? Is it this wine that's got all these different interpretations? Or do you feel there's a need for a South African style to bring it down, narrow it a little bit to what you feel really speaks of South African Pinotage?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. I think Pinotage is the Rassie of the wine world. You shouldn't try and fence him in, because you'll constantly think out of the box. Pinotage can be made in very different styles, and each style is unique. Ultimately, it should be a good wine. It should be a balanced wine. It should be a wine that respects the fruit and respects the aging potential of the wine. So that to me is the intrinsics of a Pinotage. I do think that Pinotage as a category is slightly moving towards more elegant style wines with better balance, maybe not as alcoholic as in the past, but I think that's a general perception of most wines. So that would be that would be my take on it. But you still need to have a good wine to start with all the intrinsics to be in place. And then while I have you, I think it's important to say that Pinotage is celebrating its 100th 100th year of being around, and celebrations next year. So that's also something to look forward to.
Look out for plenty of celebrations on Dan Really Likes Wine with Pinotage next year. There are many fans. Rancher Austin is one of them. A Wikdekrans barrel select Pinotage is divine, says Rancher. It certainly is. In fact, I've managed to salvage some of it from my wife, but not much. Drinking delightfully. Josephine Priot joins us so regularly on the show, our Burgundian friend. So glad to see you again, Yvonne. Big kiss from Burgundy, where we start today our harvest. Will be very exciting to taste your Chardonnay. Harvest beginning. Bonne chance, Josephine. J'espère qu'il va très bien cette année. And that we see you back in South Africa soon. Let's jump over to Megan. We've been talking here about identity when it comes to Pinotage. What about the identity of South African bubbles? You're in a valley which for a long time, you got a sense, consciously or subconsciously, the winemakers were trying to pay tribute to Burgundy with the wine from, give the Chardonnay, give the Pinot Noir that Burgundian feel. And I think we've now moved on from that. We've realized that we're actually making great Pinot Noir and great Chardonnay on our own terms, and it's got a very South African feel. We've also in the past had we're trying to make champagne, and again, I think that has switched as well. And we understand now that we make terrific Cup Classique, and we do it again on our own terms. Is that a fair assessment? Is that what guides you in terms of how you see the future of what you're producing?
Absolutely, Dan. I mean, our decision to go into purely Cup Classique production takes nothing away from the other producers in the Himalayan Order. It is an area that I would say has been put on a stage for South African Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And it's the same thing again. It's a beautiful, cool climate. It's the lower pHs, higher acidities. It is this more sort of old world style of making Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but still having very much its own identity. I mean, that's why we're able to have Pinot Noir celebrations every year and, express what the Himalayan Order is bringing for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And I think we very much, the Himalayan Order itself has very much found its place in the South African and international wine world in terms of what they're offering. And I think Cup Classique has very much gone the same way. I am very lucky to be part of the association, the Cup Classique Association. It's one of my favorite associations. It's just filled with winemakers and producers that support each other so much. I mean, we do base wine tastings where we all come together and we really sort of try and improve the quality in general of Cup Classique. And it's a really exciting association to be a part of. And we've done a lot of work internationally to try and showcase what is Cup Classique. I was lucky enough last year to be in the UK and be part of a South African wine, awards a South African wine event where there was an entire massive stand section dedicated just to Cup Classique. And the amount of people that came over to me and said, we've really started to get to know Cup Classique in the last couple of years. We start seeing it everywhere. And it is now our choice, like our choice of sparkling to drink. We're no longer saying, oh, maybe an alternative to Prosecco or something like that. It's what people are really enjoying and they're understanding it for what it is, not that it's a cheaper alternative to champagne. It is a very often the case, a more affordable alternative to champagne, but it has its own sort of place and its own nuances and its own beauty. And I think the association has done a lot of work internationally, but also locally to try and to get people to understand that. So I really do believe on both sides that you've mentioned, both Himalayan Order and Cup Classique in general, that there's a lot of growth and a lot of development that has been done in creating those really unique identities. And I think, we'll always just continue to see that. I mean, we in ourselves, I say, we're not champagne. We can obviously be very inspired by it. We ourselves have just launched a Blanc de Noir, which is perhaps something that you don't find a lot of in South Africa, 100% Pinot Noir Cup Classiques. Definitely more common in the Alto Rouge region of Champagne. But I'm hoping that will change. I'm hoping that the more we, get people to love Cup Classique and realize that we create an exceptional product that can rival any other, sparkling wine production around the world, that we will get people going into more niche products like this. There's a lot of beautiful Chenin bubbly that is coming out of South Africa too, which is also unique to us. So yeah, I definitely think we finding our place.
I had the pleasure of having dinner on Thursday night at the living room at Summerhill, and I see Johannes Richter, outstanding chef, and his wife Johanna, such a superb sommelier, is cheering you on Instagram, Megan, and a couple of people have joined that chorus. So you've got lots of people watching with enthusiasm, but also expectation, both for the quality wine, also exactly what you do. And I have a bit of a game I play with myself in the wine industry, where I have a winemaker on the show when they're starting something new or starting their own space, and they look me in the eye, Megan, and they tell me very honestly that they're only going to make 2 wines. And 4 years later, they've got 106 different wines on offer, and they're covering all their bases. What, in theory, at the moment, is the plan for the range, for what you release? Where would you like to see yourself in a few years' time in terms of what your Cup Classique offering is?
Yeah, no, I can very much understand that. I think everyone has initial plans and things change, but and that's the beauty of the industry. But I think for us, I'm not drinking myself. I'm 38 weeks pregnant, so you will not find me, unfortunately, drinking bubbly, but very soon. But just to show our, our one of our new releases, the Lady Ashley, which is a much anticipated bubbles. It's what I've been talking about at trade shows and wine shows for the last 2 or 3 years. That was a soon to be released bubbles, and it's finally out. And so that was one of the more exciting releases. We're doing a demi-sec. I think you either are part of the demi-sec journey or you're left behind. It's become such a popular category in the South African Cup Classique industry. And so those are two really big ones that are joining our main core range. And then we're doing another Claudia RD. So in exceptional vintages where we believe the ageability of the wine was just surpassed what we were currently doing as a house style. We kept aside 250 bottles for an anticipated later re-release. So we're re-releasing the RD 2012. And that's our main core range. That's not to say that we won't, as we grow and experiment and find new things, new passions in the future, that we won't continue to grow that range. I don't want to tell you, it'll only be those 6 and never anymore. I think anything we do over and above, that core range, those core 6 wines, and even the RD is only in select years. The Blanc de Blanc Cuvée is only in select years, but we will always, I think, find passion on small parcels of things that we can produce. We've just planted this year our first sort of champagne clone Chardonnay block, which will take its name after my daughter once she's arrived. So it's very special to me and my husband. And the idea from that is that in 10 years' time, when we've got a beautiful established block, we can create a single vineyard, very small production, specialist Cup Classique from that block. And we may see more of that coming out in the future for Domaine de Dieux. And I think the one thing that I think our consumers or our followers, I mean, we have a lot of people who've continued on this journey with us for many years and have tasted, from our very first vintage of Claudia to the 2018 that we're on now. And I think the one thing people can just know is that even more so now with our focus being purely on Cup Classique, is that we are going to create something that is always of exceptional quality. If we release something, it is because we believe we found like a little parcel that we can do something really beautiful with. And so there's always just this expectation of really beautiful, exceptional, high-end quality, award-winning Cup Classique that will come from our house. And I think it's a nice opportunity to maybe try, 1 out of 100 bottles of something unique when you visit the tasting room. So I can't give you a final figure, Dan, on what we will be, but for now we are a range of 6 Cup Classiques by the end of the year.
All right. Well, look, whatever you end up with, we are the lucky ones for the wine that lies ahead. I was hoping to persuade you that Danielle, Bertha, Megan, DeWet might be a great name for your daughter, but we'll have to maybe leave that one for now. We'll definitely be celebrating, though, with you. So keep in touch with the new arrival. Let's head back to Bertho to wrap up what's a really exciting time for all 4 of our guests today. We've spoken a lot on the show, Bertho, about evolution and how wines have changed. Those very first instances, the reason you could get away with calling your wine a Burgundian wine was because it was so driven. There have been changes through the years. The 2022 vintage I drank very happily over the weekend. In fact, my wife almost allowed me a whole glass before she finished off the rest. And it did 2 things for me. It reminded me of just what a consistently good wine Alto has been under your stewardship and under your watch, and particularly with the new ownership. But also that you get that sweet spot where it's wine that at only 2 years of age, I was able to drink quite happily. And yet I know I can still put it away for a few more years and watch it develop a little more. Where for you is this wine? Where is the 2022 vintage? And what do you think it says about this wonderful South African icon that is bringing up its 100?
Then the blend of the 22 is 44% Cab Sav, then 42 Shiraz, so it's predominantly Cab Sav, and Shiraz 12% Cab Franc, and then 2% of Petit Verdot. So that's generally we're aiming for a third cab, a third Shiraz, and a third cab Franc, and then little bits and pieces of Merlot and Petit Verdot. But I think for Alto, and I think the golden thread of all the vintages coming from the last, well, let's say the last 100 years, is that it comes from this unique area. And I really think that if you, I think all the wines that we have on the show tonight, everything comes from a specific area, and that specific area dictates the style, it dictates the profile of the wine. And I'm happy if I can have Alto Rouge for the last 5 or 7 vintages next to each other. And yes, the blends will differ. Some years will have more Cab Franc, some years more Shiraz, some more Cab. But I think there's a golden thread running through the DNA. And if you can get that right, it gives you a sense of place, it gives you a sense of quality, and something that you can't really go around the corner and get from many areas and try to combine that in one bottle. I think all the wines tonight, it comes from a specific place, and there's a sense of terroir that you can sense in all the wines, I'm sure. So I think for Alto Rouge, that's definitely one of the major contributors to the last 100 years success.
And on that note of 100 years, as we wrap up the show, you're like 98% of the winemakers I know where you always direct the plaudits and the kudos elsewhere, and our winemakers are not a boastful or proud lot. There's a lot of humility through the wine industry. Let's try and set that aside as much as we can. What does it feel like for you to be raising the bat for Alto Rouge as the custodian of this 100th vintage, knowing the family history, knowing how few winemakers have had the honor of making Alto Rouge, and you being the person who's giving a very excited, not just South Africa, but world of Alto Rouge fans, this really, really special vintage?
Yeah, no, obviously it's fantastic to be part of the system for the last couple of years, and even more special having 2 father-son commendations, and taking over from my father a couple of years ago. So no, it's absolutely fantastic, and I think we just here for the time being. As we all saw, anything can happen in the next couple of days, and the thing is to make the best of it and make sure that you leave a legacy. I think every previous winemaker that we've had, there's only been 4 in the last 100 years, has made it really remarkable and contributed to what we have today. And hopefully we can in the next, maybe in 50 years time, you can sit back, or I'll sit next to the beach and someone else will be doing this and saying, yes, no, it's also grateful having the first 5 there, and now I'm number 6 or whatever. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic opportunity for us. It's a fantastic opportunity for the industry. I think for us, it's really, really special. But for South Africa as a country, it's really important to have more of these brands and to make sure that we can go out to the world and say, listen, we haven't been around the block only for 2, 5, 10, 20 vintages. We've done this for quite a while, and this is the reason why it's going so well. So I think for South African wine industry, we can applaud ourselves, and to the next 100, I'll raise a glass to that.
I think, Bertho, every single other guest on the show, everybody watching, will echo exactly what you have just said, because what Alto Rouge has done for South African wine over now a century and counting, because this journey's got a long way to go, has been so important. And you are not just a favorite for so many, but such an integral part of South Africa's wine history. And you've delivered a really, really strong 100th vintage, but then that's to be expected, both given the winemaker and this particular wine. So Bertho, to you and the team, congratulations on the 100, and thank you for allowing us to celebrate it with you. I've got a second bottle, unless it's my wife watching the show, in which case this is AI and I don't have a second bottle. But congratulations. Yvonne, congratulations to you too as well. Lovely to see the new wine take shape. You've hit the spot beautifully with the first one. And in fact, your husband sent me another 6 emails since the show began. So I'm sure there'll be more wines to add to the Yvonne legacy. We'll watch out for them. Megan, once the little one has arrived, we'll be down to pay a visit and see how things are taking shape in the Hemel. And DeWet, lovely to have you on the show. New journey, really exciting one. And let's plan some pinotage conversations for 2025. But for now, to all of you guys, thank you so much. It's lovely to see in 4 very different spaces, such exciting stories. And that just adds to the vibrancy of our wine estate and reminds us of what great wine and great people we've got as part of the industry. So big thank you to you all. Enjoy your respective celebrations, and we shall have you back again soon with many more glasses. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dan. Cheers.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much.
So there we go. Wine to look out for in the next little while. Bubbles and Bubbles Alone coming out of the Hemelanada and the Domaine de Dieux team with Megan. Also look out for the brand new Yvonne. At the moment, it's a Chardonnay, but I think there'll be one or two more before too long. DeWet working his particular brand of magic out of Wikdekrans, and 100 years and counting of Alto Rouge. Really special show. Some really special people. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate all the support. We'll see you back later on in the week. For now, happy drinking. Goodbye.